Welcome to the Family Milk Cow podcast, where in every episode I cover topics that equip you with the skills and know-how to look after your girls in the barn. Family milk cows are more than just livestock. They are a part of our families. They deserve the best care possible from knowledgeable and responsible owners. So pull up a chair or your milk stool and let's dive into another episode of the Family Milk Cow podcast. Hello. Oh my goodness. I can't believe that we're actually here. I'm actually here, and you're here listening to the first episode ever of the Family Milk Cow podcast. Now, I wasn't thinking when I named the podcast what I did, what a mouthful that is. So I apologize if I stumble over it on occasion on my own podcast title. My goodness. I am Kelsey Wulf. Welcome. You may know me from my blog and YouTube channel, Rough and Tumble Farmhouse. If not, if this is the first time you're kind of meeting me virtually, so to speak, hello, it is so nice to meet you, and I'm so glad you're here. So, in this first episode, I really just wanted to talk about who I am, what this podcast is, and what you can expect. There are literally thousands of podcasts out there. I don't want to waste your time. I want to make sure you are getting out of this podcast what you are hoping to. So let's just start at the top. Who am I? I am a small farmer in northwestern Minnesota. We lived on our homestead for 6 years now, a little over 6 years. And prior to this, I do at this point now, I feel like I can say I have a background in agriculture because I've been working in agriculture for about 15 years. It's a very long story. I can direct you to some other podcasts I've actually been on if you want to hear kind of all the bits and pieces. But the very short version is that I have worked on a grass-based sheep farm. I was a shepherd for a spring. I worked at a grass-based cow dairy where they also worked into their rotation pasture-raised pork and also pasture-raised eggs. I worked weekends at a small scale goat dairy. Is that just about everything? I think I'm pretty close. And then the biggest thing is probably I spent 4 years living and working at an organic vegetable farm. So I have a lot of experience now in the kind of small scale egg industry and family milk cows. We'll get into that next. So why am I involved with family milk cows? How did this even happen? So of course I did work, like I said, at a grass-based cow dairy. And after working at that dairy, I didn't want to have cows. It was too much work. I just thought this is not for me. Even though it was grass-based and fairly holistic, there were just things about it I just really couldn't stomach, like separating calves from their moms right away and other things that just I wasn't a big fan of. And plus also being tied to milking twice a day. Don't get me wrong, I really like milking cows, but sometimes having a break is it's really necessary. So, cut to a few years later, I'm working at the organic vegetable farm, and they decided to get a family milk cow. And they figured out pretty soon into it, they also did not want to be dairy farmers. They did not enjoy milking a cow every day. But I rediscovered my enjoyment of dairy cows and having a cow on a smaller scale or a couple of cows. We just hand milked to begin with, and then we transitioned into machine milking. So, I have done both. And it was from there that I really discovered how much I enjoyed working with cows and loved cows and just all the incredible benefits that one animal can bring to your farm or to your homestead. So that cow that we had, her name was Bee, God rest her sweet soul. She ended up getting hardware disease, which we'll cover in a different episode. And so she passed away after having only her second calf. But that second calf is my herd boss, my queen cow, Juneberry. And we've had Juneberry for 6 years. She was born here on our homestead. And she has had 5 calves now, I believe. And so right now she is out in the pasture somewhere with her latest little one, Bluebird. So we just have the 2 cows right now, though at the most we have had 4. So my goodness, I've already gone off on kind of a whole trail talking about myself. So now let's talk about this podcast and why you are here and what the purpose of this podcast is. So in all my years of having family milk cows, I've just been so frustrated at the lack of resources there are for people who are doing it on a small scale. There's stuff out there for great big dairy producers. There's really not a lot out there for the little guy. So I'm sure if you're listening to this, if you already have family milk cows or you're interested, you very likely have in your bookshelf or on your library checkout list, Keeping the Family Cow. It's an excellent, wonderful resource, a good place to start. And even though it was updated, it is still incredibly outdated, and there's a lot more that can be added to it at this point. If you're like me, you probably are also in some groups on Facebook. A few of those that I'm in have 30 plus thousand members, and those Facebook groups are they're so hit or miss because if someone posts a question, a few people are going to be complete trolls in their answer and be just mean and I can't stand that. It makes me so crazy. And some of the people are going to reply with completely wrong answers that are actually dangerous for your cow. And then you're going to have maybe a couple of people who actually give sound advice on there. So it's a total crapshoot on those Facebook groups. And so then maybe too, there's the Keeping the Family Cow message boards. Those I find a little bit more reliable. But at the end of the day, there just isn't something with up-to-date information for the little guy like me and probably like you. So that is why I am making this podcast. I want to have current information for people who are looking for the best veterinary info, nutrition information, grazing management, all that kind of stuff. Those are all things we're going to cover in this podcast. Now, some episodes are just going to be me chatting with you if I feel like my years of experience are enough to talk with some decent authority on a subject, but in a lot of places, I'm going to want to bring in some guests. So we're going to have veterinarians on here, AI technicians, folks that work in grazing and livestock management. It's going to run the gamut. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is sort of the general vibe of the podcast. As you maybe picked up, I'm a very just conversational person. I'm not putting on airs. I'm just here to chat with you as if we were sitting in your living room or sitting in your barn and trying to bring you this information that you need. On top of that, really quick, we're definitely going to be staying away as much as we can from politics on this vibe. I don't care what your political beliefs are. We are all here to take care of our cows. But that being said, there are some topics that can kind of verge into that a little bit. So just to get kind of my perspective on things quickly, let's say antibiotics, for example. I think there's a lot that can be done. If you think about the saying, what is it? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of the cure. So I think there's a lot we can do in how we care for our animals, how we manage our grazing, a lot about the holistic management of our farms and our animals that can prevent the need for a lot of veterinary care. That being said, I am so grateful that we do have those things when we need them. If my animals are really sick and need an antibiotic, by God, I'm giving them an antibiotic. I don't know if any of you listening have ever read or listened to the James Herriot books. He's a country veterinarian, has the All Creatures Great and Small. As you listen to those stories, he tells them in the 30s and 40s and listening to the animals that were lost over the years and things that they just couldn't help because they didn't have the right medicines. And then as technology advanced, they were able to save and treat so many different things. So I'm absolutely not against Western medicine. I am all for holistic animal care, but it's there for us to use if the situation calls for it. And I'm glad that we have it. So that kind of explains sort of my perspective on things. So if you think she's a loony, I don't want to listen to any more that she has to say, now you can kind of know and just tune me out, turn me off. But if that is kind of, where you kind of think and believe as well, then this podcast is probably the place for you. So episodes are going to be coming out in seasons. I'm going to have probably 2 seasons a year, about 12 episodes a season. We're going to keep them down to about 20 minutes. So it's something that you can listen to while you go out and do chores or while you're milking your cow. And that way we can really thoroughly cover topics to make sure you're getting all the information that you need. Now, if all of that sounds really good to you and you are on board, there are a few ways that you can stay connected and get involved. So Family Milk Cow Podcast is on all the socials, Facebook, well, not all the socials. I'm not a big social media person, which is very awkward as a blogger, but I'm on as many of the socials as I can kind of manage. So you can find it on Facebook and on Instagram. I'm not doing X or whatever that is. Lord help me. I'm also not probably going to be on Pinterest with this one. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I lied completely. We're just on Facebook. We're on Instagram. That's about it. But there are other ways you can get involved. You can definitely join the Milkmaid Brigade, which is a way to support the podcast I have set up for listeners. We have levels starting as low as $3 all the way up to $50. Podcasts are not free to put together. It takes a lot of time and effort on my part to do this. I do not have a team of people. This is me right now, literally in the guest room in our basement, recording this episode right now while my son is napping. So support for this podcast is incredibly important. If you want more episodes and more content, the more support I have, the easier that's going to be. So head on over to familymilkcowpodcast.com, and that is going to have ways that you can support the show. And one last thing I'll say about the Milkmaid Brigade is I have set up a lot of really cool perks and benefits at those sponsorship levels. So not only are you giving money towards the podcast and helping keep it running, but you're also going to get some really cool perks along the way. And of course, the perks get cooler the higher the level that you're supporting the podcast at. Another way you can get involved is you can be a guest on the podcast. I am looking for folks who are licensed veterinarians, AI folks. If you do hoof care, we're looking for all sorts of people from diverse backgrounds to hop on the podcast. Or if you are just a family milk cow owner and have a lot of years experience or a lot of experience in one particular breed, or maybe you're an entrepreneur or you make cheeses. We want to talk with everybody. I think it's so fun and inspiring to chat with people who not only have family milk cows, but also who have taken that and run with it and created a business around it. So that's always exciting too. Another way you can get involved with the podcast is you can sponsor an episode. Maybe you are an entrepreneur, a small business person, or you're a blogger, and this is kind of your crowd here, the homestead, small scale farm crowd. Then you can absolutely get our media kit from us and you can sponsor, and I say us as if we come from a company. You can get the media kit from me. I'll send it your way and you can become an episode sponsor. Since episodes are short, we're just having one sponsor an episode. I hate podcasts with a lot of ads, so just one sponsor per episode. And we have, again, different levels of sponsorship for each episode. So hopefully we can fit a lot of different budgets. So that way it's not just the big guys, it's the little guys like me who can also be a part of making this podcast happen. A few other simple ways you can stay involved with and support this podcast. One is simply by sharing it. If you know other folks who have family milk cows, have the dream of having some cows, please send this podcast their way. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, it's super helpful. By all podcasters ask you to do it is to rate and review and subscribe and turn on automatic downloads. That makes our metrics look really good. So that way we can get more support and more listeners for the podcast. Okay, I think I've covered all the bases. It seems crazy that that's it. That's everything. But that is our very first episode of the podcast. And we will have new episodes coming out. This first season is just going to be a little mini season where it's just going to be me kind of talking through some things while I'm still kind of wet behind the ears as a podcaster. I want to sort of just do a few episodes of me, and then we will have full seasons coming out starting in 2025. But we'll have a mini season here for you this fall, winter of 2024. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Family Milk Cow Podcast. You can become a part of the Family Milk Cow Podcast by joining the Milkmaid Brigade, sponsoring an episode, or following along on social media. You can find links for all these and more, including show notes, at familymilkcowpodcast.com. If you love what you're hearing, please rate, review, subscribe, and turn on those automatic downloads. One of the best ways to support this show is simply by sharing it. And as always, make sure to give your girl down in the barn a good scratch behind the ears from me.